Hi, my name is Rich Hanlon. Welcome to this segment of My Wild Neighbors. 2 weeks ago, we took a look at some early spring wildflowers that could be found near Pine Creek. As the springtime unfolds, the next wave of wildflowers have begun to bloom. And so today, I'd like to show you some wildflowers that are currently blooming near Barbour Rock on the steep, loose, nutrient-poor soil just over the lip of the west rim of the canyon there. And so, first up is a flower that is called lyre-leaved rock cress. And this is a very interesting flowering plant that this particular one was located right there at Barbour Rock Vista, rooted in not much, just maybe a little bit of soil with some loose, partially deteriorating rock at the edge of this particular flat-topped rock at the top of the rim. Notice the clusters of small four-petaled flowers at the top of long, smooth, fleshy, purplish stems here. The leaves on the stem are narrow and rounded at the tip. You see they kind of arch out away from the stem on either side of it. And the leaves at the base of the plant, which you can't see in this picture, are different than the leaves that are on the stem. The leaves on the stem, of course, are narrow and rounded at the tip. The leaves at the base of the plant, right at ground level, are wider, and they're actually toothed. So that's interesting. There are a number of these plants that have two different kinds of shaped leaves on the same plant. So let's see. Next up is a plant that is called early meadow rue. How do you like these green dangling flowers on this springtime wildflower? The stem of this plant is it's often purple, but it's sometimes green. And the leaves, let's take a look at the leaves of the early meadow rue. As you can see, are fan-shaped and layered on top of each other at the end of these stems. And so the early meadow rue is a very interesting plant, and now that I've given you some identification information on that, you'll notice it as soon as you see it along a number of our trails along the west rim of the Pine Creek Gorge there. And so next up, we have a flower that is called early saxifrage. Notice these clusters of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 petaled flowers on the top of a long stem. Really make this flower stand out on the hillside among the rocks and the other plants that are there. Now, let's take a look at the base of the plant. Here's the base of the early saxifrage. And first off, notice the long stem is covered with short hairs. That's very noticeable in the field when you're looking at this plant up close. And also at the base, like the rock cress, this is another plant that has leaves that really like to hug the ground at the base of the plant. And notice the rounded and toothed leaves are low, hugging the ground in which this flowering plant is firmly rooted. All right, so that is the early saxifrage. Next up, we have a flowering plant that is called round-leaf ragwort. Notice the yellow flowers with thin yellow petals as on a greenish purple stem. Now the leaves on this particular plant, let's take a look at one where the flowers aren't opened yet. You can see the leaves along the stem are very wrinkly, right? But then if we take a look at the leaves that are at the base of this plant, you can see the leaves that are hugging the ground are very narrow at the base, but very wide and rounded. And so that is where it's because of these leaves at the base of the plant where the round-leafed ragwort gets its name. And next up, we have a plant that is called plantain-leaved pussy toes. Notice the fuzzy white flower clusters on a tall and smooth stem. And in addition to that, you'll notice that you see all the leaves of this plant on the ground around it, the narrow-based, wide, rounded leaves that hug the ground at the base. And particular identification feature of this plant that separates this from other similar species is that each of these wide rounded leaves at the base has 3 veins. Each leaf has 3 veins on it. All right, and now here's a flowering plant that I'm very excited to share with you. This is called moss phlox. It is a plant that blankets the exposed flat top rocks in a way that makes it look like a spiky moss. And I think that's probably where it gets its name, moss phlox. It is a type of phlox, and it resembles moss on a rock sometimes. So it's a low growing plant that's highlighted this time of year by an abundance of pink and purple petaled flowers like this one. Notice that each flower has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 petals, and each petal has a notch at the end of that rounded tip. Okay, and so that's a way to identify the moss phlox by the flower. And just as important as the flower for identifying this one is the shape of the leaf. Notice the leaves are very narrow and pointy at the tip. They're small, narrow, and pointed at the tip. The leaves of moss phlox have a very spiky appearance. It's a very interesting plant. So let's take a step back, and you can see this is part of the rocky hillside at Barbour Rock Trail there. Look at all this diversity. The moss phlox, the early saxifrage, the plantain-leaved pussy toes, so many different species together on these same rocky faces. And so I hope you've enjoyed this short wildlife tour of the flowering plants at Barbour Rock. Now, if you decide to get a look at these plants yourself, I recommend bringing a pair of binoculars with you because some of these plants that you're out to see may be beyond the reach of accessibility if they're 20, 30 feet down on a rocky face that is very difficult to get to. So thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.